Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Our guest today is Mr. Grzegorz Kołodko, the former Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister of Poland. How does he look at the recent countervailing duties levied by the European Union against Chinese-made electric vehicles? And how does he see the challenges and the recent stimulus measures towards the Chinese economy? Here's my conversation with a former Polish leader. Professor Kołodko, so good to see you again, this time in person. Welcome back to China. Recently, you are writing an article arguing for the concept of shortageflation syndrome that you think the world is suffering. What is that?
Well, this is my invention in the English language economic literature. It's a very nasty combination of two phenomena, which was as a cancer in the state socialism, centrally planned economy some time ago in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. And it implies that at the same time, we did have shortage of supply. There was not enough goods and services to be bought by household, by people in the shops. And at the same time, the prices were growing. And I think that one main reason of the collapse of the former political and economic system in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union was the very strong shortageflation syndrome. And what China has proved in the course of especially in the 90s and till today, that it is possible to modify the economic and political system in such a way that we have market equilibrium. If one has money, one can buy whatever one wants, and still to keep inflation under firm control.
Yeah, it's important that in an economy, people feel like their lives are better than their parents, and their lives are better today than yesterday. Let's talk about the Chinese economy.
Well, absolutely, no, but most of the time we don't like to listen that we are better than our parents or grandparents. That is one point of relevance, how it is now compared with how it was sometime in the past. But most of the time people are comparing their current situation vis-a-vis the standard of living, etc., the welfare, with the others, mostly with the richer countries. People are not happy that the income is much, much higher. And the second point of comparison most of the time is what it is. What is our situation, our economic situation, with what it could be like according to our imagination. Sometimes these expectations are exaggerated, but most of the time, due to ambition, they drive the motivation. We want it better, and that makes us working in a more efficient, more competitive way to keep the improvement of the situation. But the change of standard of living of the young generation of Chinese people, if compared with the standard of living of the parents and grandparents, it is something which has not happened in the history of the mankind. What China has accomplished in 20, 30 years, it did take over 100, 150 years in the United States. This is, really remarkable. I came first time to China in 1989. This is just only 35 years ago. And each time I'm coming to China, and recently quite often, I see the progress by my own eyes, not only reading the statistical data.
Yeah, there have been concerns about the Chinese economy. If you look at the GDP figure for the first 3 quarters, the overall annual target of the Chinese government is for the economy to grow 5%. How do you assess the performance of the Chinese economy for the first 3 quarters?
Being an economist, I'm very much aware of the challenges you are facing in China, but I do know also that China's authorities are very much aware of these challenges, together with the business leadership and the policy response, the management response, the governance response is an adequate one. What was recently taking place in China, what was recently decided by the government to lose a little bit monetary policy, to encourage supply, to raise the consumption of the household sector, it's the right direction of the adjustment. My second point is I'm not that much, concerned that China is growing only 5% this year, because it will be close to 5% if we stay with the GDP comparison with the last year. Still, 5% GDP growth is about twice as high as the world average. 5% is much more than we have the growth in the European Union, and in some countries there is not growth at all. For instance, in Germany, the biggest economy of the European continent, there is already second year recession. The output is going down a little bit, maybe this year by 0.2%. In the United States, there is a robust economic growth, but it is still much less than 5%. So again, depends how we compare. If we compare this year growth in China measured by GDP with what you were able to accomplish, say, 10, 20 years ago, it is much slower, but it is still firmly above the world average. So China is catching up, but at the slower race because it's already at the higher level.
So, Professor, you're not a big fan of the so-called middle income trap, first coined in 2007, I believe, by the World Bank, indicating that there are about currently 108 countries falling into that category, falling into that trap, you know, averaging with average GNI per capita at $1,100 all the way to $13,000, and China, Brazil, India, Turkey, countries belonging to that category. So you're saying you're not a big fan of that?
I'm not buying it. I don't think it's a correct theory. The mechanism works in such a way that the higher is the income, the lower is the rate of growth. Take a look. 3% rate of growth, it would be very fast in Germany, France, UK, or even in Poland. And 5% in China, somebody says that it is very slow. So it is natural that the richer the country is, the lower is the rate of the growth. And in the longer run, the countries lagging behind, less developed or the least developed countries, they are growing a little bit slower year after year, but this is not any trap. If we are talking about income trap, maybe we should talk about high income trap in which Japan is already for 2 decades. They are not able to raise their income. They were growing fast, and then there is a kind of stagnation. So if we are taking a look into the history of economic development, not a short time of say 3 or 5 or 10 years, but much longer periods of time, there is a permanent economic growth. And maybe somebody would like to wish China to be caught in trap of middle income, but it is not going to happen. China is growing and will be growing, but not 10, 12% as it was in the past, but maybe 4, 5, 6%, which still is remarkable. And this is also the case of most of the countries. For instance, in my country, Poland, when I'm considered to be an architect of Polish economic success, our GDP per capita now is about 3 times higher than only 30 years ago. But when I was first time Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, 4 years, 1994, 1997, average rate of growth was 6.8% in real times. Now it is absolutely impossible to accomplish such a high rate of growth. We have this year maybe 3.1, maybe 3.2%, and it is considered to be very fast growth. So we are growing, but slower than a decade or 2 or 3 decades, because there are less of reserves. For instance, one reason for fast growth, including China in the past and Poland in the past, and very, very many years ago, also United States, that was the transfer, the shift of the labor from agriculture to industries, to manufacturing. Now you cannot move people from agriculture to industry because it has happened already. So for that reason, the labor efficiency is growing slower. Overall economic pace is going down, but there is still an economic growth, and there is nothing like middle income trap.
So talking about the Chinese economy, the government is scrambling for measures to fine-tuning the Chinese economy to stimulate consumption, to make people happier, to make investors coming to China and stay in China. What would be your advice to the Chinese economic policymakers at this point in time?
There are different issues. When you are talking about foreign capital investors coming to China, it is also a consequence of the overall political situation, of geopolitical changes. So now we are at the age of tectonic geopolitical changes, which are fueled mostly by rising China, which is not so much welcome news in the United States and in some other parts of the West, yet rising China is a very positive factor contributing to the global development. And because of the political tensions, we have also in some parts of the world some investors that are a little bit conservative, a little bit hectic to invest or not to invest, or if they have additional capital for foreign investments, they are looking for better location. So, and China must be aware that China is the biggest market in the so-called global South. And the very big challenge for China is to shift the economy from definitely led by export and investment to more fueled by consumption. But it is easier to accomplish than to be competitive in export-led growth, etc. So I'm positive about Chinese economy.
Let's look at the international landscape, Prime Minister. On November the 5th, or the latest November the 6th, we will have a new U.S. president-elect, be it Harris or Trump again. How do you expect that the new U.S. president-elect will fine-tune or change his China policy, if at all?
Whoever will be the next president of the United States, and as of today, we don't know, the American policy, U.S. policy to China will not change dramatically. The biggest difference between President Harris, if that's going to be the case, and President Trump, if this is going to be the case, is that Ms. Harris is more predictable. Under President Harris, American policy to China will stay the course. By and large, she will continue the policy of administration of President Biden. If Trump will become the president, he is much more unpredictable. He can surprise us this or that way, but hardly will surprise us by being more sympathetic to China. He said already that the first day what he will do. He loves to say what he will do in the first day. It's raising the import duties to 100%. So far, he's only saying so. But the Biden administration, where Ms. Harris is deputy president, they raised already the import duties for competitive, high-quality electric cars made in China to 100%. So you cannot raise the import duties twice to 100%. They're already 100%. Friend Trump cannot make it much worse. But unfortunately, I do not expect from the next presidency of the United States any breakthrough, any shift towards more sensible, more pragmatic policy towards China. I wish that the dialogue will continue, and with all the tensions which we have between the United States and China, the situation will not deteriorate, and there will be ups and downs, whoever will be the president of the United States.
Yeah, with the intensifying great power rivalry, there comes fragmentation of the world economy, supply chains, friendshoring, nearshoring, so on and so forth. Do you still believe in what you once called the irreversible globalization? I think you mentioned that term in your book, New Pragmatism.
Yes, one of my book, Political Economy of New Pragmatism, has a subtitle, Economics and Politics of Irreversible. Globalization is irreversible. I mean economic globalization because of interrelations between businesses all over the world, and because it is a good factor for development. But there are the turbulence. There is less maturity of this globalization, especially after the previous Trump administration, if there will be the next one. So globalization does continue, but at the same time we have new nationalism, we have protectionism, we have the trade war, we have tariffs, etc., which is hardly advised by sensible economics. It is rather driven by the political reasoning, which I think is ill-advised. You know, I wish that policy will be also more knowledge-based. Pretty often we are hearing saying knowledge-based economy. I would like to have more knowledge-based policy, but policy is not knowledge-based, policy is emotion-based. Definitely China's policy is much more knowledge-based than American policy.
Yeah, well-informed policies.
In China we have a different political system than, say, in the West, but this system is being supported by meritocracy. The people which know that 2 times 2 is 4 are taking the decisions. But sometimes, you know, in the West, starting from the United States, it seems, you know, like the people which are making decisions, they still believe that this is 2 times 2, 5 or 3, or depends, are you selling or buying? So the policy driven by emotions is not a good advice for economic rationality. There is less of rationality in the global economy, what is not implying that this is the end of globalization. Now, what you have raised, it is maybe the most interesting viewpoint from geopolitical changes. I remember the book published a dozen or so years ago, which was called The West and the Rest. So there was the West with the hegemon position of the United States, and then there was the rest, including most of the people of the world, starting with, at that time, still the most populous country of the world, rising China. Now I hear much more a concept of so-called global South. And within the global South, China aspires to be the leader of global South, but somebody else too. India would like to be also more influential within so-called global South, whatever global South implies. So maybe I will write a book or a short essay, which will be this time called Global South and the Rest. So now Global South is relatively more and more important, because Global South is more than 40% of the global output, if not more. It is more than 80% of the world population of over 8 billion of us, and China is a leading force of the global South, what we see at the fora, like recently BRICS summit in Kazan, city of Russia, what we see also on the United Nations fora and elsewhere. And it is hardly acceptable by the United States, European Union, British, German, French, Italian, Polish position is somehow different. It is hardly acceptable by the United States that they are losing their hegemonic position. They are afraid that if they will lose it, because they will not be a hegemon of the world, I mean the United States anymore. This position will be taken by China. Do not make mistake. China neither wish or is able to be the hegemon of the world. But China is working to the end of multipolar world. So we have this political or geopolitical game which is making a significant impact on economic competitiveness or on trade, flow of capital, portfolio, direct investment. And for that reason, even tonight, when I got an email from my colleague professor from Poland, he has written to me, you know, actually I'm not sure that they need the economists, because now the politics is being driven by an economic reasoning. There is not economic justification for 100% import duties for China-made electric cars, you know, for forbidding investment by Huawei in 5G internet network in a country like Poland or Italy or whatever. It is driven by rationality of politics, if it is rationality, because I see the political behavior of some countries, mostly in the West rather than in the global South, rather irrational than rational. So we will have plenty of problems because of interaction between politics and economics.
Yeah, Professor, do you think there will be a truly multipolar world, given what happened in the past 200 years? There has been either one global monopoly, hegemon, or countries trying to become that hegemon, be it in the 1800s, the British Empire, the 1900s, the American dominance after the war, and even when there were two polars, the US and the former USSR, they were trying to be that so very hegemon, and now the rivalry between China and the United States. Do you think a true multilateralism can materialize?
It's gone absolutely into this direction. I'm smiling because I recall what I said to my students. You are talking about recent, say, century or two. I referred to what was like the world 2,000 years ago. They were G7, and the ancient G7. It was China, India, it was also Iran, it was also Egypt and Greek Roman Empire. So the West actually did not exist in the sense it is existing now. So what we are talking here, what people are concerned about is the situation now, after the election in US, next year, what will be the growth in China, etc. But the history is taking place. We are going through the historical changes. World is very different than it was only 30 years ago, and it will be dramatically different in 30 years from now. There will be much stronger China, there will be much stronger Indonesia, and of course India and Brazil, and relatively so-called West, starting from the US, but also UK, also France, Germany, will be relatively weaker. So we are bound, or if you wish, we are doomed to exercise multipolarism, political and economic one. We have reinstitutionalized the global economic and political order, starting from reconstructing the permanent security seats within the Security Council of the United Nations, BRICS plus. It's another piece of new global architecture. So what we have to take care of to go through this historical process in most possibly peaceful way, because for the time being we have several military conflicts, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the tragic war in the Middle East, the humanitarian catastrophe in Sudan. Somebody says that we have about 50 different size military conflicts in the contemporary world. So now the question is how to manage this shift from hegemony world led by US after the collapse of the Soviet Union 3 decades ago into multipolar, peacefully evolving world with changing these mighty countries. So more of dialogue, more of intellectual, cultural cooperation, more of education of next generation, more of discussion. This is the solution. And ability to compromise. I've been in the politics. You know, when I'm at university, I'm saying it is enough to be correct. But the moment you go to politics, to be correct is not enough. You need majority. Majority of the people to understand what, that is why you are doing what you are doing. On the international scene, it is still much more complex because of conflict of of ideas and of interests. But there is the solution to this conflicting interest, what you call in China, win-win globalization. That is actual acknowledgement that globalization indeed is irreversible, but it can be inclusive. You are getting a little bit, I'm getting a little bit. The question is, what is the difference between this a little bit? How much equitable this exchange is, how much fair it is. It is a problem, it will remain the problem, but we do have the knowledge in economics how to take it into advantage for the peaceful development. The question is that in some parts of this challenging world, there is not enough political commitment to take advantage of our professional technocratic knowledge.
You're a leader of Poland, which is a country of the European Union, so that I've got to ask you this question. How do you look at the European Union's countervailing duties on Chinese electric vehicles?
Definitely, I'm not in favor of these duties. I don't buy this concept of China's overcapacity in general or in an industry. I think basically this is the problem that China has become, to the surprise of many, yet they shouldn't be the surprise, because China's electric vehicle, they are the result of long-term, deliberate the industrial policy. We should know that China is coming to the market. Maybe it is still a shock for somebody that it has come in such short period of time and with such competitive high technology. But I think it's an economic policy mistake, which is driven basically by Sino-skeptic sentiment, and on the other hand also by concern about motor car industries which are not competitive enough. We should get rid of these import duties because, as I'm saying, also in different situations, action provokes a reaction. We, I mean the European Union, has imposed import duties for China electric vehicles, so China reacted. So trade war in the longer run backfires. It is never positive for the parties involved. The question actually is not if you have a trade war, and now we have a kind of trade war between US and China, and now also unfortunately European Union and China. The question is not who is going to win, but who is going to lose less. So the outcome is a negative one, and I do hope that aside of political interest, the economic reasoning will take over, and there will be more fair competition between China and the European Union. The world of the future consists, not is divided for, but consists of Euro-Atlantic megasphere and Eurasian megasphere. And European Union is a part of both. We are the part of Euro-Atlantic, but we are also a part of Eurasian. So from this perspective, European Union, Poland, we should not take a part in ongoing tug-of-war conflict debates between US and China. We should not take a side, pro or anti. We should work together with both on the behalf of our economies, on behalf of our people. Maybe this is what you mean in China by win-win globalization. Win-win globalization has a good future, but the good future will happen after quite a difficult future in the short run.
Talk about your books. I have one here. Will China Save the World?
The book is also published in English language under the title The Political Economy of Rise of China.
You're a prolific writer. 99 books so far?
That is why I'm so much in favor of knowledge-based politics. I have published so far 6 books in Chinese and about 25 books in English. So that is also showing somehow the proportions. We have to be more active in Chinese than we are in English language.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you again next time.